Okay, we are going to be doing a little bit of watercolor and ink practice, some techniques that we need to figure out. And I've set up these light tables at the front of my desk so you can expedite the way that you're going to create this paper right here. And this paper has all the lines that this does, because you're going to fill that with a grayscale and watercolor, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to take your blank paper and you're going to line it up with the paper taped down to the light table. And it should be around the same size as this outer line. Do not draw that outer line. That's just for helping you line everything up. And then what you're going to do is trace all of those marks with dashes. Notice that I have dashes here, okay? They are not dots. They have a direction, and I want you to follow those directions. Look at the corners. They have two directions. Each of the other sets of marks will have a direction, and I'm going to show you how I want you to do that. Let me zoom in a little bit. Maybe that will work. I think we can do it right like that. Okay, so once you have your paper lined up here, come on, zoom in. There we go. You're going to mark the corner going that way and that way. Each of these are going to go follow that line towards the inside, like a little dash mark. And really pay attention to how I do these dash marks and which ones I include and which ones I do not. Both directions in the corners. Last set right here. I don't need these to be super dark or anything. All right, I think I have all the dots that I need. Now the second step will be to connect by using a ruler. I have one right here. I'm going to start by lining up those dash marks in the corner and draw my line straight across to connect. I'm going to come over to the next one that goes this direction. I'm going to stop at my dash mark. On to the next. just like that. Now, I'm going to turn my paper. Notice that I do not go up here. I start at my dash mark here, because I have a section of grid and I have a section that is two longer, thicker lines, and that's part of our assignment, but we'll get to that when we actually do the painting part of the demonstration. Work steady through. You want to stay consistent with how you're using the ruler, how you're drawing your lines. And then I go to the corner and connect those corners. Okay, this is what it looks like when it's completed, and then we'll just save this and then do the watercolor and ink demonstration. One thing I want to say is, while you're up at the light table and you're tracing your image onto your actual watercolor paper, this is all you need, okay? This paper and these dots, once you have those dots and dashes, you are going to take your paper to your table. Then you will use the ruler and accomplish this step. Okay. We're going to talk about our setup for doing our grayscale. We're going to do our grayscale first, and then we'll venture into watercolor. But I want to talk about the equipment that we have and how to set up for your grayscale. First of all, I have my paper here. I'm going to set this to the side so I don't accidentally get it dirty. I don't want to get anything messed up before I even start, but let's talk about the other equipment. First of all, I have a water container right here, and you'll notice that it has two different sides and a middle partition. When you fill up your water container, you do not want to go above this area. This is supposed to be completely dry, so about ½ an inch below that is where my water level is on each side. Both sides need to be full, but not over the middle partition. And I want you to look at that real quick, because the lines and grooves in the bottom of the container have a specific purpose. This side is going to be where you wash your brush first. It's the first rinse, and you want your brush to go this direction. So when I'm washing my brush out on this side, I'm going to initially rinse it like this. Once I've done there, I kind of shake it out, and then I go to the second side for the second rinse, and I go like this. My brush goes in this direction. This side will inevitably be the cleaner side, okay? Just the way it works. Now, we need to set up our ink. Ink is an incredibly messy thing, and this big jug of ink will spill everywhere if you let it. I do have another container. It contains the same exact ink. I fill these up, and they have a dropper, which is very careful, so if you would rather use this, you absolutely can. I'll show you the benefits to both, and I think the messiness is the con of each. But I will be using this. I will show you how to use this first, though. So this is actually a dropper. You can squeeze it, and this thing does get clogged sometimes, but you want to undo the lid and put it back down as far as you can, and then let it suck up as much ink as possible. And then you're going to place the ink in your palette. Your palette is not going to look exactly the same as this. Yours is round. And I thought I had one over here to show you guys, but I must have misplaced it. But it's basically a round version of this. So, if you want to use the dropper, you may, and then you're going to basically squeeze that until it's full of ink. Now I'm going to switch to the big jug, and I'm going to fill up the rest. Now, that is the opener. It's kind of like shampoo. And I'm going to very carefully try to drop the ink into that without getting out. Okay. Now you can see kind of how full that is. Very carefully closing the shampoo type lid. And I did get a little bit on my finger, but that's just the way it goes. Now what I want to do is start creating different values of gray. And for now, what I'll do is I'll just pick up some of the pure ink, and I'll make a little mark for myself, a reference. Okay, this is how black the pure ink is. Now I'm gonna rinse that out. And for this purpose, I don't really need to do a second rinse because I'm just creating the values here. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pick up the pure ink, and then I'm going to wipe that into this second cup. It looks like my ink had a little goober in it, so I'm going to take that out. Okay, so I've gotten about half of this cup full. Now I'm going to wash my brush out. Just the first rinse. And I'm going to start to fill this cup until it is completely full with just the water. And this is the dirty side, so it doesn't even matter because this is just a really diluted ink water. It's not even going to be that big of a deal if I just use that side. But you can kind of see the limitations of this brush, which is a pretty big brush for what it is. I'm trying to get it to where you can see it. You know, that's a pretty good sized brush, especially if you compare it to this, which is about the size that comes in the watercolor container. But then you also have brushes like this. And these are gonna pick up a lot more water. So you can always use that, pick up as much water as possible, and it will go a lot faster. I just squeeze that out into that cup and it basically filled it up. And now that's done. Notice that I switch back to this brush now. I want to pick up or mix that cup around. You want to mix it, and then you want to test how dark it is. And that's good. That seems almost black, but you can kind of tell around the edges where it's thinner that it's going to be lighter. And I'm going to pick that up again, and I'm going to put this in here. Till I get about, I don't know, that much. And then I'm gonna wash my brush out a little bit, get some water. That initial rinse is probably good. I'm gonna switch now to this brush, pick up a lot of water, and squeeze it into that cup until it's full. Mix that around, wipe it back off of your brush, and do a new square. Big difference. At this point, you're kind of evaluating the steps from pure black to a little bit lighter, a lot lighter. So maybe that's too light. Maybe I take some of this and I put it back in there. But every time you do that, you need to kind of check and see how dark it is. Maybe I go to the pure black and I add a little bit. That's a good step right there, I think. That's a little bit darker than my original one there. What's the next step? Well, you're just repeating that until you get the lightest gray that you want. And that's the process. I would probably do one more cup. And this is gonna be my extremely light gray. You can barely even see the difference. But to the naked eye, you can see a difference there. Okay, for this part, Guys, I'm going to be doing a little bit of the next part of the video, so keep that in mind. For this part, we want to make sure that we order number these correctly. This is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. As you know, we're going to start with number 9, which is the pure black ink. I'm using a relatively small brush, but it holds enough of the ink to cover this square. I definitely want the tip of the brush to point towards the line. That way I can control where the brush is and where it's not going to go over the line. I want to completely blacken this square out. That's about as far as I can go before I need to turn my paper. And point the tip of the brush towards these other 2 edges. Then I can fill that in. Make sure you don't let the ink get too thin or it will get lighter. We want this to be pure black, so turn my paper again. Keep the tip of the brush where you know it's going to be right up against the line without going over. That way you maintain control of where your ink is going. The ink is most likely going to lighten up a little bit as it dries. You can only do so much to control that. It just depends. And every ink is different, so just kind of figure out which one is the best in your own opinion. Now, that looks very light from the video because of the glare. As it dries, that glare will go away, but you can kind of see that is pure black. All right, which is the next square to do? That would be halfway between pure black and pure white, which is number 1. Halfway between is 5, and we want a middle tone gray. That means it's halfway between pure white and pure black. I like to have my scratch paper ready so I can retest all my little cups of ink here. I might go to the one in the middle first and ask myself, do I really think that's about halfway? It looks pretty good. And you're gonna see a little bit of, can you guys even see what I'm doing there? This is the square I just painted. You can kind of see how it's darker down here. When I do it on number 5, I'll talk about how to avoid that darker area. I am gonna start with my middle cup here. I'm gonna pick up that paint. Repeat the process that I did for number 9. Got quite a bit of ink in that brush, and it looks really dark at first because, well, that's all the ink that you're probably going to spread out throughout number 5. Again, make sure that you're in control of your brush and that the tip points towards the line. As you lean this way, if you lean your brush this way, as you get to this line, you may end up painting with the side of the brush. You don't want to do that. You want to stop before you get there, put your ink down, and turn your paper. To maintain that control on where the ink is being put down on the paper. Now, as I said before, I have one part of my square that is lighter because as you paint with ink or watercolor, the ink will pool in the lowest area of the square. I'm going to attempt to show you what that looks like. You can kind of see where that is pulling in the right side, especially in that bottom right corner. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wash my brush out completely, and I'm going to squeeze the clean water out. You can also just use paper towel to kind of dab it on there. And now I'm going to pick up that extra ink and use my brush to do that. Never touch the paper with paper towel. If you mess up, a lot of people want to quickly get a piece of paper towel and dab it off the paper before it really sets in. And what that does is it makes it go everywhere, and it really pushes it into the paper surface, and sometimes you can't get that out. So, dry your brush, and it will act like a sponge. You're just dabbing that area where the darkest ink is until it starts to match. Wash your brush out, dry your brush, and do it as many times as it takes. Squeeze the moisture out of the bristles, and it will start to pick up like a sponge. The next square we're going to do is number 3. So we want to go from pure white to halfway between 1 and 5. So we want to go from pure white to that middle gray, halfway between middle gray and pure white for number 3. This square right here. Again, I'm going to check the color grade I'm starting with. I'm going to start with the lightest. Now this might be too light. It's very, very light. Let me go to the second cup. But I think that's too dark. I think what I need to do is to do this first cup, let it dry, and add another layer later. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick up this lightest value of gray that I have on my palette, and I'm going to fill box number 3 right here. Painting is the same process as we've done before. Right up along the line. Control where the ink is going to go. Turn your paper. That is very, very light. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let that dry, and I'll come back to it and add another coat. A little bit of pulling there. Not finished with number 3, but I'm going to move on to number 7. Halfway between pure black and half middle gray. Middle gray, I don't know why I said half, but halfway between middle gray and pure black. I go to my second darkest cup here. It's pretty good. I don't know if that's going to be dark enough, but I'm going to start here, and I can always add another coat. I can always add another coat of that same exact ink or something lighter. Keep control of the brush. Stop before you get to that right edge or corner. Notice that I'm spreading this ink out. And as I spread it out, it gets a little bit lighter. That's because more of the paper is showing through. It's like adding white to the ink itself. It's spreading thinner. And I'm going to pull all that extra ink into this corner here. I'm going to try to keep this square as even as I can possibly make it. Maybe going back and forth a couple of times to evenly spread that out. What happens is if one side of the square starts to dry out, it will soak in or get lighter. It can go either way. But I'm gonna pull that extra ink into the corner, wash my brush, and then dry it on my paper towel and soak that extra ink up. Just by lightly dabbing the corner. That'll do two things. It'll take the extra ink away, and it will help this dry at an even rate. If one little corner of it dries way faster, then there could be a line between the part that's dry and the part that's still a little wet. So there we have it. We have 1 is done, 3 still needs another coat, 5 is pretty close to done, and 7 is done, and 9 is definitely done. I think number 3 is dry enough for me to add another coat, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. And I'm just going to evaluate whether or not I think it's as dark as it needs to be once it's dry. see that transition. Before I start adding layers to these other numbers, I'm gonna let number 3 dry. Definitely want to make sure that all of these 4 dry completely before I go to the even numbers, 2, 4, 6, 8. Now that I've added that second layer to number 3, I do think that number 5 seems a little light. It's a little uneven as well, so maybe if I add another coat of this lighter value, lightest value of ink, if I just add that to it, maybe I can even it out as well. Let me see what that looks like. It's a very careful approach because you're not really changing a lot with that lightest value anyway. Turn my paper. I want to work pretty quick. Now, you might have noticed I dipped into this. I have a lighter area in this corner of number 5 for some reason. And I think that has to do with how it dried, and then how much I was dabbing out of that corner. As it dried, it got lighter and lighter. So I'm going to kind of lift my paper up. You can see here I'm lifting this corner up. And that is just to push that kind of puddle into this corner, so it will darken just a tad. You can also do that if you want to take some of the moisture away and wash your brush out, squeeze the moisture out or dry it out with your paper towel. Kind of strafe across the top, pushing the puddle into the corner but also taking away some of that moisture. Remember, we never do this process with a paper towel. Never touch the paper with paper towel because it will harm the surface of the paper and push the ink farther in to the surface of the paper rather than taking it away. I'm going to do a third coat of the lightest gray on my 3. And I'm going to say that that one is now done. You can see that I have this lightest gray here and then this middle tone here. And it does get darker as you get to 7 and then to black. But you need to kind of look at all 5 of these. And I say 5 because we start with number 1. That's the pure white. Do they step up evenly. Are these too close together? Are these too close together? Are they not close enough? Go back down to 1. Look at this. Does that have the correct relationship? If I had to say anything, it would be that number 3 and number 5 have a different relationship to one another than number 7 and number 5 have. I would say they appear to be closer to one another than this one does. What does that mean? Does that mean I need to darken number 3 still? Does it mean that I need to darken number 7? If I darken number 7, is it too close to number 9? What is 8 gonna look like when I get there? That is the kind of question you have to ask yourself and evaluate. It does you absolutely no good to have me tell you what it should look like. You have to evaluate this. You have to say, okay, what's this relationship? Is it the same as the relationship between 5 and 7? Because it should be. 5 and 7's relationship should be similar to 3 and 5's relationship. Just a lighter version of it. I think perhaps we still need to darken 3 a little bit, a skosh. But I also may wait until after I do 2, 4, 6, and 8 to do my final adjustment. Leaving yourself a little wiggle room there is okay. And you let this dry, and then you do the even numbers. The first half is done. Okay. Number 3 is not quite done drying yet. I have to let that dry completely before I do number 2. The danger is if this is at all moist or wet or damp, and I do number 2 and I take my brush and I touch that, even if I just touch it a little bit, whatever liquid I have in here is going to spill into this wet area. So I've got to let that dry completely. I wish I had my heat gun because that would make it a lot faster. With ink, you can kind of tell when it's dry because it will soak up into the paper and it'll no longer be glossy. It'll look matte. That shine does mean that it has moisture in it, but even then it could still be wet enough to bleed in a little bit. So you really gotta wait and be patient. One way that you can also tell if if it's still got some moisture in it is if you put the back of your hand on it and it immediately feels cool. That coolness is because there's moisture. And if you do that too soon, it will mess this up. So don't do it if it's within the first 4 minutes. Got to give that time. You might be asking yourself, well, if you can't do number 3 and you know 7 and 9 are completely dry, you know that for a fact, why can't you just go ahead and do number 8? Well, the answer is you probably could. But I want you to evaluate these values as you go, so that's why I say number 2 next, because it's halfway between 1 and 3. You want this shade of gray to have the same relationship to 1 as it does to 3. That's what you're evaluating. And that should inform you on how 4 should look, because 3 and 4 should have the same step up relationship as 4 to 5 do. Okay. Now that I'm pretty sure that these are all completely dry, 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, I can start doing the even numbers. Since we're on the lighter side with number 2 here, I need the relationship between 2 and 1 to be the same as 2 to 3. So I'm going to start with my lightest gray. The process is exactly the same. I'm just adding this ink in, control where the ink goes. Turn your paper to make sure you stay in control of where that ink goes. Shh. And you want to work kind of quickly so you keep that nice and even. You don't want it to dry in one place too fast. Keep that moisture even as you go across.
Go ahead.
There you go. It's a good look at it. I'm going to let that dry before I put another coat on there. I do think it is going to require another coat. Number 3 might need another coat. I don't know. But I'm going to go ahead and move to number 4 now. I'm going to test out this second cup of ink on my scratch paper first. Looks pretty good. Use the tip of the brush to control where the ink is going into the square. Make sure those hairs don't go over any lines. And turn your paper as you need. Just like on number 2, I'm going to make sure that I go over everything. Make sure it's all drying at the same rate. Now I do have a little bit of extra ink right here in the corner, so I'm going to wipe my brush and dab that out a little bit. If you need to, clean it. And okay, so now that I've done number 4, which one is darker, 4 or 3? Pretty close together, almost exactly the same.
4.
That tells me that I need 4 to be darker, because they should get darker as they go towards number 9. I'm not asking you guys to answer me. I'm just trying to make the video. Yes. Okay. Back to the second cup. When I add another coat of that same ink to number 4. As this pulls into the corner, I'm going to dab that extra ink out. Now I'm going to move on to number 6. Going to go to this middle gray, same one I used for number 5. And I'm going to start there. Quickly work across. Turn your paper as needed. Turn your paper as needed to maintain control of where your ink is going up to the line and filling the square in. Spread that out evenly across the whole square. I'm going to wash my brush out and dry it. this has to dry before I can add to it. This is number 6 right here. 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to go ahead and put my first coat in from this second darkest cup on number 8. Move this ink around so the whole square starts to dry at the same time. Wash my brush out, dry it off, pick up any extra ink. Now, by the time I'm done putting the ink down on number 8, these others should be ready for a second coat if needed. I think number 2 is definitely going to need that. So I'm going to go back to my lightest color, lightest ink. as this dries up, I'm going to make sure I'm pulling away any extra ink in the corners. I'm going to go to number 4 and add another coat to that. I'm going to use the second cup, second darkest, or the second cup, so it's the second lightest, I should say. Move on to number 6. I'm going to go in the middle. There's someone there right now. Is she back? Okay. Yeah, that's a really nice gray. I think this is probably where number 5 is going to end up being. I think this is as dark as number 5 should be. I can't add another coat to number 5 because the 2 squares on each side are wet right now. And I'm gonna use the middle cup again and add a layer to number 8. But I want to be a little bit more careful about how fast I'm darkening these squares. So I'm going to use that lighter one to build some difference between 7 and 8, but not just double up on that shade of gray, because it might jump too fast. And I'm evaluating these as I go, so I want to make sure that I can still add more value, because you can't take it away. Once it's on there forever. And you can always add more. You can't always take it away. That's really nice. I like that gray. It's kind of hard to see because of the glare. Let me try picking it up so you can see it. And you can kind of see the differences. I would say through 4 to 7, we're way too close to the same, right? So we've got to adjust those, and then 2 and 3 are almost identical. So you know 3's got to get darker. No, number 2 is no longer shiny. Number 4 is a little bit shiny still. Remember, you can, if it's not shiny at all, you can use the back of your hand to kind of touch and see if it feels cool. That one definitely is cold. So I know that it's still pretty wet, damp. So I should not paint number 3 until that is gone away and it's completely dry. Okay, in these last steps, your objective is to get these squares to transition darker evenly. You must evaluate the relationship between one square and its neighboring squares and ask yourself, does it step up evenly? Does it get darker in the same rate going to each square? Right now you can tell number 2 and 3 are very close to the same, so 3's got to get darker. I'm going to go to my second square here, and if you're thinking about, you know, the values you have here in these cups and the values you're putting down on the scale, you've really got to synthesize the correct step to take and look at the values in the cups and look at the values on the paper. Really maintain control of where the ink is. Try not to go over any edges. Now let's say I want that value on number 3, which is kind of hard to see now that there's a glare there. You gotta see if I lift it. Maybe I want 4 to get the same amount darker, I can go ahead with that same value and add another layer to 4 to darken that just a little bit, just a step. If you look at 1, 2, 3, 4, I really do think that it's starting to step up evenly, but I also need a little bit darker value on 5. Because I'm adding the same value, I don't really have to worry about it bleeding into 4. It's not gonna do anything because that's all still wet and this is still wet. And that being a little bit darker, it does step up nicely from 1 all the way to 5. I think 6 is gonna have to get darker as well. I'm gonna go ahead and let those dry a bit. I'm pretty happy with 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. I even like 7, 8, and 9, but I think 6 needs to get darker. It's too close to what I have here on 5. Wash that out. Let these dry a bit. I'm going to go into 6 with that same value, second cup. Not quite dark enough. I'm going to grab some from this next cup. That's pretty dark. So what I want to do is I'll take some of this and I'll put it over here, add some water to it. Still pretty dark. Float that into number 6 here. Now adding that value to 6 really does help it step away from number 5. And that's good, that's what I want. If you can, I can lift it so you can see it without the glare. You can see that step a little bit clearer. Now 7 and 6 are a little close together, so I'm going to take that same value that I have, add that to 7 as well. Now on the camera, when I lifted it up that time, it looked like 7 and 8 were very close to the same. And maybe they are, maybe they're too close to one another, but when I'm looking at them and not the camera, this is noticeably lighter than this. I still need to let that dry before I can really evaluate whether this needs to be a step darker than 7. Perhaps it does. Perhaps it would be better off with a darker coat, and I might add it. But at this point, I'm pretty happy with the rest. And I'm definitely not going to add anything while these are all still wet. If this was too liquidy, this could potentially invade these areas and destroy all of them. If it was too wet, if I had a puddle of water instead of just the top surface being kind of slickened by the amount of ink that I put down, it's not really a puddle. But if it was, it could invade these areas that aren't completely dry. I don't know why, but this area of number 5 has been repeatedly getting lighter as it dries, and so I took that value that I had made over here on the side and I added it to the corner. It looks pretty even to me now. We will have to wait and see. Yeah, a little touch more right in there. Now if this is dried, I am going to add another coat of darkness to number 8. I'm going to start in this middle cup here. It's a nice step darker. I think that gives me a little bit of room to darken 7, just a little bit, and then darken 6 just a little bit. Should be done after that. For number 7, I'm gonna darken it, but I'm gonna start with this lighter gray, maybe a little bit of this over here. And I think I'm gonna do 6 as well. And the reason I can do that is because 7 is fully dried, so It's like adding a step of value to that square to make it darker, but the ink that's there already is not going to blend with it. It's just going to be there on top of it. So it will darken 6 and 7 at the same rate. It's accumulative that way, but not. They will still remain to have their differences. If that makes sense. Give you a little sneak peek without the glare. You can kind of see the difference now. That 6 took a step darker away from 5. And now I'm done. So what's the next step? Well, the next step is to do this again. Once you've finished this first one, you're going to go skip a row and do it again right here. I do not really want you to do this row and this row at the same time. I want you to have this example complete. Then you skip a row and you do it here. These other two are going to be for our watercolor demonstration, so do not paint these two. We're gonna do the bottom row, skip a row, and we do another grayscale here.